It's commonly believed that addiction is a disease, and I was certainly told that as a kid, almost every fucking day. That something in the brain goes wrong, and once it does, you carry it for life. But that doesn't actually explain what we see. Most people who use drugs don't become addicted, and the same person who can move in and out of addiction depending on their life. So something else is driving this, something bigger than chemistry. Is addiction isn't really a disease. What is it? Drug and Addiction, an Anarchist Perspective. Dickie Dredd. Part 47 in Chapter 6, Medicine and Misdiagnosis. This is section 49 in the book, Addiction as Disease, the Convenient Narrative. The notion of addiction as disease was born from compassion and convenience in equal measure. It promised to lift moral shame from the addict while preserving the authority of medicine. In theory, it replaced sin with symptom. In practice, it exchanged one hierarchy for another. The diagnosis of chronic relapsing condition carried a secular version of original sin. Once an addict, always an addict. Recovery meant submission to a doctrine. The language was medicinal rather than theological, but the ritual was the same. The American temperance legacy merged easily with emerging neuroscience. Where the preacher once warned of temptation, the neurologist now spoke of dopamine. Both described a fall from grace followed by redemption through surrender. The 12-step movement, formalised by Alcoholics Anonymous, institutionalised this duality. Personal responsibility wrapped in collective confession. As discussed earlier in section 47, the addict was reborn through ritual obedience. Such faith has saved lives, yet it defined identity through perpetual illness. To be healed, one must never be cured. By the 1980s, the disease model fused with pharmaceutical logic. Where earlier psychiatry relied on confinement, modern addiction medicine relied on substitution, methadone for heroin, buprenorphine for methadone, antidepressants for withdrawal. Each treatment required maintenance and measurement, turning recovery into a program of managed dependence. Whitaker calls this medicinal expansion of good intention. The conversion of suffering into subscription. The addict became a lifelong patient, their chemical salvation tied to the same corporate pipeline that fueled the epidemic. This model appealed to policymakers precisely because it was depoliticised. If addiction is a genetic or neurological flaw, social reform becomes irrelevant. Poverty, alienation and trauma dissolve into the language of receptors and neurotransmitters. The factory worker drinking to survive a 12-hour shift and the banker medicating burnout appear equal before the molecule. Such neutrality conceals justice. Alexander argues that addiction is less a disease of the brain than a disease of disconnection, a predictable response to environments stripped of meaning and belonging. The convenience extends further. The disease narrative legitimizes surveillance and coercion in the name of care. Drug courts, testing regimes and compulsory rehabilitation replicate the asylum's logic under a benevolent banner. Each relapse confirms the theory. Each act of resistance becomes a symptom. The individual story, the history of loss or rebellion or of choice, is rewritten by diagnosis. To question the framework is to be labelled in denial. The circular reasoning and pathology protects itself from the critique. Meanwhile, the biology of addiction remains more contested than conclusive. No scan has found a universal addict brain. No molecule explains why some return to the bottle while others walk away. The idea of having addictive personality is nonsense. Neuroimaging shows correlation, not cause. The dopamine surge so often cited appears in every act of pleasure, from prayer to dancing, yet no one calls a devout or the raver, diseased. The line between passion and pathology, as noted earlier on sacred chemistry, is drawn by culture, not chemistry. The same critique applies to the popular notion of the addictive personality. Both born from a mix of pop psychology and pharmaceutical marketing, it implies that certain people are wired for weakness while others are not. The idea survives because it flatters both clinician and client. The former gains authority, the latter an alibi. Yet controlled substances studies show no consistent constellation of traits that predict substance dependence once trauma, stress and environment are accounted for. As Alexander and Marte both argue, compulsion is learned adaptation, not destiny. The brain is plastic. Its circuits reflect history, not heredity. The label addictive personality therefore functions less as diagnosis than a self-fulfilling prophecy, a linguistic loop that encourages the very behaviour it claims to explain. Within clinical culture, it echoes the once an addict, always an addict refrain discussed in section 49, reinforcing identity through fear. In truth, no brain is built for addiction. Any brain deprived of connection will seek relief. Anarchist perspectives offer a different lens. If the disease model centralises control, a politics of autonomy restores agency. Healing begins not in surrender to a hierarchy, but in the recreation of community, mutual aid, shared responsibility, spaces where intoxication and abstinence can coexist without stigma. The addict ceases to be patient and becomes more participant. This reframing aligns with the principle of stewardship outlined in section 48, harm reduction as radical empathy, not moral compromise. To dismantle the disease myth is not to deny biology, it is to restore proportion. Brain chemistry matters, but so does class, trauma and love. A society that treats despair as defect will continue to medicate symptoms while ignoring causes. True recovery demands a shift from treatment to understanding, from control to compassion. Question is no longer what is wrong with the addict, but what is wrong with the world that makes escape so necessary. Addiction, then, is not an isolated pathology, but a mirror held to civilization itself. As psychiatry moves deeper into algorithmic precision, the same moral logic now governs general medicine. The next section follows that drift, from the managed addict to the managed patient, tracing how health itself became another form of obedience. Addiction isn't just a broken brain. It's a response to the conditions people live in. And if that's true, then treating it as a lifelong disease doesn't solve the problem, it manages it. Which means entire systems built around treatment may be reinforcing the very thing they claim to fix. So if addiction isn't rooted in biology alone, why are we still pretending it is? And if we've got that so wrong, what does that say about everything built on top of it? Next up, same chapter Medicine Misdiagnosis, Part 50, The Mismeasured Mind, Testing, Tracking and Compliance.